The death of Julius Caesar did not save the Roman Republic. Instead, it plunged Rome into even greater chaos. The conspirators believed they had restored freedom, but within hours of Caesar's assassination, the city was gripped by fear. Citizens locked themselves inside their homes. Senators fled. Soldiers waited anxiously to see who would seize power next. Blood stained the floor of the Senate House, but the future of Rome remained uncertain. For a brief moment, the assassins believed they had won. Brutus, Cassius, and the other conspirators walked proudly through the streets carrying their daggers, expecting to be welcomed as liberators. They imagined cheering crowds thanking them for ending Caesar's dictatorship. Instead, they found silence. Ordinary Romans did not celebrate. Many had admired Caesar because he had provided food, land, and opportunities that the old Senate had ignored for generations. The conspirators quickly realized they had killed the man but not his popularity. As Rome struggled with uncertainty, another surprise emerged. Caesar's will was opened and read before the Roman people. Inside was a revelation that stunned everyone. Julius Caesar had legally adopted a young man as his son and principal heir. His name was Gaius Octavius. History would remember him as Augustus. At the time, almost nobody considered him important. He was only 18 years old, slight in appearance, often ill, and completely inexperienced in commanding armies. Compared to legendary generals like Mark Antony or powerful senators like Cicero, Octavian seemed insignificant. Many dismissed him as a frightened boy who would disappear from history. They could not have been more wrong. When news reached Octavian, he was studying in Illyricum, preparing for a military campaign with Caesar. Friends advised him to reject the inheritance. Becoming Caesar's adopted son meant inheriting not only his wealth but also his enemies. It was an incredibly dangerous decision, yet Octavian accepted immediately. He sailed across the Adriatic Sea toward Italy, knowing full well that powerful men might kill him before he even reached Rome. As he stepped onto Italian soil, he no longer introduced himself as Octavian. He proudly called himself Gaius Julius Caesar, the adopted son of the murdered dictator. The name itself was a political weapon. Every veteran who had fought beside Caesar recognized it. Every supporter of Caesar felt hope. Every enemy of Caesar felt threatened. Meanwhile, Mark Antony believed he would naturally become Caesar's political successor. Antony had served faithfully beside Caesar for years. He was an experienced commander, popular with the soldiers, fearless in battle, and already one of Rome's most powerful politicians. When Antony heard about the teenage heir, he laughed. He reportedly considered Octavian nothing more than an inexperienced child. That mistake would haunt him for the rest of his life. Octavian entered Rome quietly, without a large army or grand procession. Unlike Antony, he rarely spoke loudly or displayed anger. He listened far more than he talked. Behind his calm appearance, however, was an extraordinary political mind. He immediately began meeting Caesar's old supporters. He honored Caesar's promises. He visited veterans. Most importantly, he fulfilled the gift Caesar had left to the Roman people in his will. Each Roman citizen received the money Caesar had promised them. This simple act transformed public opinion. People began comparing the young heir to the ambitious Mark Antony. One appeared loyal to Caesar. The other appeared interested only in power. Even though Antony controlled more soldiers, Octavian slowly won something equally valuable: the trust of the people. The Roman Senate noticed this rivalry immediately. Many senators hated Antony, fearing he might become another dictator. Some believed they could use Octavian against him. One of Rome's greatest orators, Marcus Tullius Cicero, became especially interested in the young Caesar. Cicero had opposed Julius Caesar for years but considered Antony a far greater threat. He famously described Octavian as someone who should be praised, honored, and then discarded. Cicero believed he could manipulate the teenager for the Senate's benefit. Like Antony, Cicero underestimated him. Octavian smiled politely. He accepted every compliment. He thanked every senator. But privately, he was building his own network of loyalty. Instead of depending entirely on politicians, he appealed directly to Caesar's veterans. Thousands of retired soldiers still remembered the victories in Gaul, the Civil War, and countless campaigns fought under Caesar's command. To them, Octavian represented their beloved general's legacy. Many volunteered to fight for him. Others donated money. Some convinced entire military units to support the young heir instead of Antony. For the first time, Rome realized that this 18-year-old was becoming a serious political force. The rivalry between Antony and Octavian soon grew impossible to ignore. Both claimed to defend Caesar's memory. Both competed for the loyalty of soldiers. Both accused the other of betraying Rome. Neither trusted the other. The Republic itself stood caught between ambitious men, each believing destiny had chosen him to lead. The tension finally exploded when Antony marched north to attack one of Caesar's assassins who controlled a strategic province. The Senate, desperate to stop Antony, did something extraordinary. They officially gave military command to Octavian. The teenager who had arrived with almost nothing suddenly found himself leading Roman armies. The Senate believed they controlled him. Antony believed he could crush him. Neither understood the man they had created. The stage was now set for another civil war. Rome had escaped one dictator only to enter an even bloodier struggle, and at its center stood a young man who had inherited far more than Caesar's fortune. He had inherited Caesar's ambition. The fragile balance of power in Rome finally collapsed. What had begun as a political rivalry between Octavian and Mark Antony soon became a struggle that threatened to tear the Roman world apart. Neither man trusted the Senate, and neither intended to surrender Caesar's legacy. Yet both understood a simple truth: before they could fight each other, they first had to destroy Caesar's assassins. Brutus and Cassius had fled east after the assassination, gathering loyal legions throughout Greece, Asia Minor, and Syria. They still believed they were the defenders of the Republic. They controlled enormous wealth, commanded experienced armies, and hoped that time would strengthen their position. Across the Mediterranean, Rome was now divided into two hostile camps, each claiming to fight for justice. In Italy, however, events moved quickly. Mark Antony underestimated Octavian one final time. After several military setbacks, Antony found himself politically isolated, while Octavian's popularity continued to grow. Soldiers who had once laughed at Caesar's young heir now began swearing loyalty to him. The Senate believed they could still control Octavian, but the teenager had learned one of Rome's oldest lessons: power belonged to the man who commanded the army. In 43 BC, Octavian marched toward Rome with his legions. Unlike Caesar years earlier, he encountered almost no resistance. Senators who had once ignored him suddenly greeted him with respect. Facing the silent threat of thousands of armed soldiers outside the city, the Senate had little choice. At only 19 years old, Octavian was elected consul, the highest political office in Rome. The Republic had just witnessed something extraordinary. A teenager now held one of its most powerful positions. Yet Octavian knew he still could not defeat Brutus and Cassius alone. Nor could Antony. The civil wars had exhausted Rome, and neither leader wished to fight two enemies at once. So, despite their mutual hatred, Octavian and Antony agreed to meet. Joining them was another influential politician and military commander, Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. The three men gathered on a small island in northern Italy, surrounded by armed guards to prevent betrayal. According to ancient historians, each leader arrived with soldiers watching every movement of the others. Nobody trusted anyone. After days of negotiation, they reached an agreement that would change Roman history forever. Together they formed the Second Triumvirate. Unlike the earlier alliance between Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, this was not a private political arrangement. The Roman state officially granted these three men extraordinary powers for 5 years. They could pass laws without Senate approval, appoint officials, confiscate property, and command armies across the Republic. In practice, they ruled as three dictators. Their first decision shocked Rome. Before marching east, they needed money to pay their soldiers. They also wanted revenge, so they published lists of enemies known as the proscriptions. Thousands of names appeared across the city. Any person whose name appeared on the list could be killed without trial. Their property would be confiscated. Their families lost legal protection. Rewards were offered to anyone who delivered the victim's head. Fear spread through Rome faster than any invading army. Neighbors betrayed neighbors. Servants informed on masters. Friends disappeared overnight. Some wealthy Romans hid inside their own homes. Others attempted desperate escapes across Italy. Few succeeded. One of the most famous victims was Cicero. Only months earlier, Cicero had believed he could manipulate Octavian against Antony. Instead, the alliance between Antony and Octavian sealed his fate. When soldiers found the elderly statesman attempting to flee, he reportedly offered no resistance. Ancient writers described him stretching out his neck calmly, accepting death with dignity. His head and hands were cut off and displayed in the Roman Forum, the very place where his speeches had once inspired the Republic. It was a horrifying message. No one, regardless of reputation or honor, stood above the new rulers. The Republic's traditions were dying in full public view. With Italy firmly under their control, the triumvirs prepared for the decisive campaign. Across the Adriatic Sea, Brutus and Cassius had assembled one of the largest armies Rome had ever seen. Together they commanded nearly 20 legions along with thousands of cavalry and allied troops. They occupied strong defensive positions near the city of Philippi in Macedonia. If they won, the Republic might survive. If they lost, Caesar's heirs would inherit Rome. In the autumn of 42 BC, the opposing armies finally faced one another. The fields around Philippi became crowded with nearly 200,000 soldiers. It was one of the largest battles in Roman history. Before the fighting began, Brutus addressed his men as defenders of liberty. Antony inspired his troops by promising revenge for Caesar. Octavian, though often ill during the campaign, remained determined to prove himself worthy of Caesar's name. The first battle produced mixed results. Antony launched a brilliant assault that overwhelmed Cassius's forces. Meanwhile, Brutus successfully defeated Octavian's wing of the battlefield. Confused by dust, smoke, and poor communication, Cassius believed the entire battle had been lost. Rather than face capture, he ordered one of his servants to kill him. It was a tragic mistake. Brutus soon discovered that part of his army had actually won. But without Cassius, the Republican cause had lost one of its greatest commanders. Several weeks later, the two armies met again. This time, Antony's battlefield experience proved decisive. Brutus's exhausted soldiers gradually broke under relentless pressure. As defeat became inevitable, Brutus refused to surrender. Following Roman tradition, he took his own life rather than be paraded through Rome as a prisoner. According to legend, his final words were directed not toward Antony or Octavian, but toward Caesar himself. Caesar, now you are avenged. With the deaths of Brutus and Cassius, organized resistance to Caesar's heirs collapsed. The men who had struck down Julius Caesar were gone. The dream of restoring the old republic faded with them. The Second Triumvirate now controlled the Roman world. To avoid immediate conflict, the victors divided the republic among themselves. Mark Antony took control of the wealthy eastern provinces. Octavian governed Italy and the western territories. Lepidus received Africa, though his influence steadily declined. From the outside, the arrangement appeared stable, but beneath the surface, ambition was already growing. Antony dreamed of glory in the east. Octavian quietly strengthened his authority in Italy. Both commanded loyal armies. Both believed they deserved to rule alone. The alliance that had destroyed Caesar's assassins had achieved its purpose. Now, only one obstacle remained: each other. The final battle for Rome had not yet begun. It was only waiting for the right moment. With Brutus and Cassius defeated, the Roman world finally seemed at peace. The assassins of Julius Caesar were gone, and the Second Triumvirate ruled without serious opposition. But beneath the appearance of unity, the alliance was already beginning to fracture. Rome was too powerful to be shared. Three rulers could never remain equals for long. Each man possessed armies, wealth, and ambition. Each believed he alone deserved to lead the Roman world. And history had already shown that when powerful Romans disagreed, civil war was never far away. The Republic had survived decades of conflict, but now its greatest danger came not from enemies beyond its borders, but from the men who claimed to defend it. After Philippi, Mark Antony traveled east to reorganize Rome's provinces. The eastern Mediterranean was far richer than the west. Egypt, Syria, Asia Minor, and Greece produced enormous wealth through trade, agriculture, and taxation. Whoever controlled the East possessed resources that could finance vast armies. Among all these territories, one kingdom stood above the rest: Egypt. Unlike the Roman provinces, Egypt remained an independent kingdom ruled by one of history's most remarkable women, Queen Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra was far more than a beautiful queen, as later Roman propaganda often claimed. She was highly educated, spoke several languages, understood diplomacy better than many Roman politicians, and ruled one of the richest kingdoms in the ancient world. Years earlier, Julius Caesar himself had been captivated by her intelligence and ambition. Their alliance had restored Cleopatra to the Egyptian throne and produced a son known as Caesarion. Now, after Caesar's death, another Roman leader entered her life: Mark Antony. The two first met officially in 41 BC at Tarsus, in modern-day Turkey. Cleopatra did not arrive like an ordinary queen. Ancient historians described her sailing up the river aboard a magnificent golden barge. Purple sails fluttered above the ship. Silver oars flashed in the sunlight. Musicians filled the air with music, while servants dressed as mythical gods surrounded her. The entire spectacle was carefully designed. It worked perfectly. Antony, already famous for his love of luxury and celebration, was immediately fascinated. What began as a political meeting soon became one of history's most famous romances. Cleopatra offered Antony something few others could provide: money, ships, food, and the wealth of Egypt. In return, Antony offered military protection and political support. Together they became one of the most powerful couples in the ancient world. While Antony spent increasing amounts of time in Alexandria, Octavian remained in Italy, facing problems of his own. Thousands of Caesar's veterans expected the land they had been promised. Providing farms for so many soldiers required confiscating property from ordinary Italian landowners. Entire communities were forced from their homes. Many blamed Octavian personally. Riots erupted across parts of Italy. For a time, his political future appeared uncertain, but Octavian possessed something Antony lacked: patience. Instead of pursuing personal glory, he carefully strengthened his position year after year. He rewarded loyal officers. He reformed local administration. He presented himself as a humble servant of Rome rather than an ambitious conqueror. Most importantly, he understood the power of public image. Across the Mediterranean, Antony's behavior provided Octavian with the perfect opportunity. The Roman people expected their leaders to place Rome above everything else. Instead, rumors spread that Antony was becoming more Egyptian than Roman. He dressed in Eastern clothing, celebrated Egyptian ceremonies, spent long periods living in Alexandria instead of Rome, and remained beside Cleopatra. Many Romans viewed these stories with suspicion and anger. Whether every rumor was true hardly mattered. Politics often depends more on perception than reality. Octavian recognized this immediately. His supporters began portraying Antony as a man corrupted by a foreign queen. Pamphlets, speeches, and public debates painted Cleopatra as a dangerous temptress manipulating Antony for Egypt's benefit. The campaign proved remarkably effective. Romans who had once admired Antony's military victories now questioned his loyalty. The situation worsened dramatically in 34 BC. Following a successful campaign in the east, Antony organized an extravagant ceremony in Alexandria. Before enormous crowds, he distributed territories to Cleopatra and their children in what became known as the Donations of Alexandria. Cleopatra received new royal titles. Their children were declared rulers over various eastern lands. Most shocking of all, Caesarion, the son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, was publicly proclaimed the legitimate heir of Caesar. For Octavian, this was political gold. If Caesarion were accepted as Caesar's true successor, Octavian's own claim to power would be weakened. He immediately launched an even more aggressive propaganda campaign. He accused Antony of planning to move Rome's capital to Alexandria. He claimed Antony intended to place Egypt above Rome. He warned that Cleopatra sought to rule the Roman world through Antony. Whether these accusations were entirely true remains uncertain, but they achieved exactly the effect Octavian desired. Public opinion shifted steadily in his favor. Then came one of the most controversial moments in Roman political history. Octavian somehow obtained Antony's private will from the Temple of the Vestal Virgins. Reading another man's will was illegal. Reading it aloud before the Senate was even more shocking. Yet Octavian ignored tradition. Before a stunned audience, he announced that Antony wished to be buried in Egypt beside Cleopatra rather than in Rome. Whether every detail was accurate remains debated by historians. But for many Romans, the damage was done. They no longer saw Antony as Rome's protector. They saw him as Cleopatra's servant. In 32 BC, the Senate officially stripped Antony of his powers. Interestingly, they avoided declaring war directly against Antony himself. Instead, they declared war against Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. This clever political move allowed Octavian to claim he was defending Rome from a foreign enemy rather than starting yet another Roman civil war. Across the Mediterranean, both sides began preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Antony assembled one of the largest fleets ever gathered in the ancient world. Warships from Egypt, Greece, and the eastern provinces filled his harbors. Cleopatra contributed enormous financial resources and over 200 Egyptian ships. Octavian relied on his brilliant general, Marcus Agrippa. Agrippa was one of the greatest naval commanders Rome had ever produced. Unlike Antony, who enjoyed luxury and celebration, Agrippa focused based entirely on strategy, discipline, and preparation. For months, he systematically weakened Antony's position by capturing ports and cutting supply lines. Gradually, Antony's enormous fleet found itself trapped. The decisive confrontation came on September 2nd, 31 BC, near the western coast of Greece, at a place called Actium. Hundreds of warships faced one another across the calm waters of the Ionian Sea. The future of Rome depended upon the coming battle. Antony possessed larger ships. Octavian possessed better planning. As the fighting intensified, confusion spread across Antony's fleet. Then, in one of history's most dramatic moments, Cleopatra's squadron suddenly broke through the battle line and sailed south toward Egypt. Seeing her departure, Antony made an astonishing decision. He abandoned much of his fleet and followed her. Thousands of his soldiers watched in disbelief as their commander disappeared over the horizon. Leaderless, Antony's remaining ships surrendered or were destroyed. The Battle of Actium was over. It was more than a military defeat. It was the collapse of Antony's dream. Octavian now stood as the undisputed master of the Roman world. Only one final chapter remained: the fate of Antony, the fate of Cleopatra, and the birth of a new Roman Empire. The Battle of Actium had changed the course of history. Although thousands of soldiers had fought on both sides, the true victory belonged to one man. Octavian had defeated the last rival capable of challenging his authority. Across the Roman world, cities began abandoning Antony's cause. Governors switched their allegiance. Legions swore loyalty to Octavian. One by one, the eastern provinces surrendered without resistance. Yet the war was not completely over. Far to the south, Antony and Cleopatra had escaped to Egypt. Alexandria, the magnificent capital of the Ptolemaic kingdom, became the final refuge of Rome's defeated leaders. Once one of the richest cities in the world, it now prepared for siege. Antony desperately tried to rebuild his army, but hope was fading rapidly. Many of his soldiers deserted. His allies abandoned him. Even commanders who had served beside him for years quietly joined Octavian. For the first time in his military career, Mark Antony stood almost alone. In the summer of 30 BC, Octavian marched into Egypt. Unlike earlier campaigns, this invasion met little resistance. Roman legions advanced steadily toward Alexandria while Antony's remaining forces collapsed around him. The man who had once commanded half the Roman world now watched his empire disappear piece by piece. Ancient historians describe Antony spending his final days haunted by regret. He had been Julius Caesar's most trusted general. He had defeated Rome's greatest enemies. He had stood victorious at Philippi. Yet every triumph had led him to this moment. According to tradition, false reports reached Antony claiming that Cleopatra had taken her own life. Heartbroken and believing he had lost everything, Antony chose to die as many Roman nobles did. He fell upon his own sword. The wound, however, did not kill him immediately. Soon afterward, he learned that Cleopatra was still alive. Mortally wounded, Antony was carried to the mausoleum where Cleopatra had locked herself inside. Ancient accounts describe him dying in her arms after one final farewell. Whether every detail is historically accurate remains uncertain, but the image became one of history's most enduring tragedies. With Antony gone, only Cleopatra remained. She understood that Octavian intended to capture her alive. In Rome, victorious generals celebrated their triumph by parading defeated kings and queens through the streets before enormous cheering crowds. Cleopatra refused to become another trophy. She attempted to negotiate with Octavian, hoping to preserve Egypt for her children. Octavian had no intention of sharing power. Egypt would become Rome's prize. Realizing her fate was sealed, Cleopatra made her final decision. According to the most famous tradition, she allowed herself to be bitten by an Egyptian cobra hidden inside a basket of figs. Other historians believe poison may have been used instead. The exact method remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Whatever happened, Cleopatra died in August 30th BC. She was 39 years old. With her death, the Ptolemaic kingdom, the dynasty founded after Alexander the Great's conquests nearly 3 centuries earlier, came to an end. Egypt became a Roman province. Its immense wealth now belonged to Octavian. Gold, grain, trade routes, and one of the richest kingdoms on earth flowed directly into Roman hands. Octavian had become the undisputed ruler of the Mediterranean, but he remembered what had happened to Julius Caesar. Caesar had openly accepted extraordinary honors. He had allowed statues to portray him like a god. He had accepted the title of dictator for life. Many Romans believed he wanted to become king, and they had murdered him for it. Octavian would not repeat that mistake. Instead of openly declaring himself king, he carefully created the illusion that the Republic still existed. The Senate continued to meet, consuls continued to be elected, magistrates continued performing their traditional duties. To ordinary Romans, the old system appeared unchanged. Behind the scenes, however, almost every important decision depended upon one man, Octavian. In 27 BC, he performed what appeared to be a remarkable act. Standing before the Senate, he announced that he wished to surrender his extraordinary powers and restore authority to the Republic. Many senators panicked. After years of civil war, nobody wanted another struggle for power. Rather than accepting his resignation, they begged him to continue leading Rome. Whether this entire event had been carefully planned remains debated, but the result was exactly what Octavian desired. The Senate rewarded him with a new honor, a title no Roman had ever held before: Augustus. The word meant the revered one or the illustrious one. It carried religious respect without openly calling him king. From that moment onward, history remembers Octavian simply as Augustus. He became Rome's first emperor, even though he never officially used that title. Instead, he preferred calling himself princeps, meaning first citizen. It sounded humble, but everyone understood where real power rested. Augustus immediately began transforming the Roman state. He reduced the size of the army while creating a permanent professional military loyal to the state rather than individual generals. He established the Praetorian Guard, an elite force responsible for protecting the emperor. He reorganized taxation, improved provincial government, expanded roads, encouraged trade, strengthened Rome's currency, and launched one of the largest building programs in Roman history. He famously declared, "I found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble." Temples rose across the capital. Forums expanded. Aqueducts supplied fresh water. Monuments celebrated Roman victories. The chaotic republic slowly transformed into a stable empire. Perhaps Augustus' greatest achievement was something Rome had not experienced for generations: peace. After decades of assassination, civil war, rebellion, and political violence, the Roman world entered a long period known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. For nearly 2 centuries, the empire enjoyed remarkable stability. Trade flourished across 3 continents. Merchants traveled safely along Roman roads. Cities grew wealthier. Art, literature, engineering, and architecture reached extraordinary heights. Millions of people benefited from the stability Augustus had created. Yet his success came with a price. The Roman Republic was effectively dead. Its institutions still existed, its traditions were still honored, its elections still took place, but ultimate authority belonged to one ruler. Rome had exchanged political freedom for peace and stability. Many citizens considered it a fair trade. Others quietly mourned the republic that had once made Rome unique. Augustus ruled for more than 40 years. Unlike Caesar, he died peacefully in his bed in AD 14, surrounded by family and loyal advisors. His final reported words reflected the life he believed he had lived. "If I have played my part well, applaud as I exit." The Senate declared him a god after his death. His adopted son, Tiberius, succeeded him without civil war. For the first time in Roman history, power passed peacefully from one ruler to another. The empire Augustus created would endure for centuries. It would stretch from the Atlantic Ocean to the deserts of Arabia, from the forests of Britain to the sands of Egypt. Its laws would shape future civilizations. Its language would influence countless others. Its architecture would inspire generations, and its rise would forever change the history of the world. But every empire, no matter how powerful, carries within it the seeds of future decline. The age of Augustus had begun. One day, the fall of Rome would follow, but that is a story for another episode.